This is Wilson Morales from Black Community TV talking to Maxwell Vivian, one of the writers of season 3 of Upload. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. So you've been with the show now a couple of seasons. As the season's now starting, what are we getting now? What's the premise of this season?
So this season, one of the main things that's happening is that we have two Nathans. We have one that has been rebooted from a backup in Lakeview, and we have one that has been downloaded into the real world at the end of last season.
Mhm. Now, I know you don't come in till later on in the season, as far as the episode that you wrote, but coming into the show, obviously, when you came on last season, as a writer, how is it challenging when you have to play catch up? When you come in as part of the team that hasn't been there from the get go.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so like you alluded to, I came in on season two. I actually started writing season two before season one premiered. So, like watched the episodes before we started writing the cuts of them and jumped right in. And yeah, it can be difficult. Luckily, like one season's not too much to catch up on. But yeah, there's always a bit of a learning curve figuring out, where you are just in terms of how you contribute in the room, but also, knowing the ins and outs of the characters, knowing the actors really well, what they're good at, what might have been left on the cutting room floor from the previous season, and why, those types of things you got to catch up on.
Mhm. Now, as a writer, and because you're only writing one episode per season as opposed to all of the episodes or multiple episodes, do you have to play not catch up, but you have to talk to the previous writers to get an idea as to like, okay, you've seen how these characters go, so that way they don't see a shift in a character's tone in later episodes.
Yeah, so even though I wrote episode 7 this season, like everyone's around for the whole process, and we really break those episodes together. Breaking is just the process of really figuring out what happens when, and we take a whole season look at that in the very beginning when we're kind of slotting the character arcs for all the different characters and where we want the story to go. So we're all mostly on the same page when we go out and write our scripts, which is super helpful. But there's always surprises. People bring in drafts, and it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting you to zig. I thought you were going to zag there, and then you get back on the same page in that regard. But we try and minimize that type of confusion as much as possible.
AI seems to be a big thing all of a sudden in the last few years, and obviously with this particular show, coming into season 3, all of you guys, from the writers and the directors, take into effect how AI plays with this show as well as real life to see if it can be incorporated.
Do you mean like in terms of in the creative process somehow?
Yeah, the creative process. You built this show on AI, but then obviously you look to see what's happening in the real world.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
how can we blend it in?
Yeah, I think one of the craziest things about that in regard to what's going on with AI so much lately with like Chat GPT and Google's Bard and things like that is that when we started writing this season, those were not the sort of ubiquitous known things that they are now. And and that's only in the span of like a year where we went from not hearing about Chat GPT to people being like, hey, Chat GPT can pass the bar now. So that didn't really exist then. Um, Speaking for myself in terms of what those things are capable of, I was very scared of them in the beginning. And then I started to use them just in, my own personal life and figure out what they could do. And now I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually not quite as smart as I think the average person might think. So I'm not sure they're as useful in that writing regard yet.
Hmm. And then there's your story. Obviously, people always want to know what does it take to be a writer and then a series writer. Especially if you're not writing the whole thing. How do you contribute and be part of the staff? Or just write one episode and move on. It's like where does that love and joy come from when you're on board for one episode as opposed to the entire series? But hey, there's a joy that you got the job.
Yeah, for sure. And I've been on for these whole series, thankfully, but it's about sort of sitting back, reading the room, and figuring out where there's a need a lot of the time. I think a lot of young writers come in and they're like, all right, I've got to talk a lot, I've got to pitch a lot, I got to be on top of it, I got to prove that I belong here. When sometimes the best thing you can do is to just like wait And when you got something really, really killer that's going to like save the day and send everybody home early, that's when you strike and that's when you take your moment. Um, yeah.
And then, you've written for others. You've written episodes, multiple episodes on one particular show. Obviously, for some time, you come on this. You know, um, you never know when the time is going to be right for to say, okay, I'm going to write and direct. Or is it you just want to be a writer?
You know, that's something that's been coming up a lot more lately in my life. And it's just like, for now, I'm very happy being a writer. I like being a writer. I'm also, travel with the show to Vancouver and cover a set. I like being on set. I like working with the directors. I don't feel that particular pull right now. Uh, I'd say about 50% of the time, I'm like, man, directing's easy. All you got to do is tell people where to point cameras. I could crush this. And the other 50% of the time, I'm like, oh my God, I am so glad somebody else is doing this because I could not do it. But yeah, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I feel like I have lots of room to grow as a writer. So sticking in my lane for now.
Now that we're season 3 is underway, I always tell everybody, listen, there's a glut right now of programs on cable, on streaming, whether or not you want to go to the movies. It's not like, no one's channel surfing anymore. It's like if you're going to turn on your TV, you're going to look for something in particular as opposed to like, what's on, what's going to get people to watch Upload if they haven't caught up to seasons 1 and 2.
It's really funny just in regards to channel surfing really quick. I find that like when I stay in a hotel and I have the ability or I have to channel surf, it's almost like a fun little novelty. I'm like, oh, remember this? Like starting a
Well, you
movie
have
through
at a hotel,
halfway
you're
through.
getting like 50 channels. You ain't getting 700 channels in a hotel.
That's true. It
So
keeps it nice and
you're
manageable. Yeah.
yeah, you're either gonna get the sports channels, the news channels, the Spanish channels, or your procedurals. So your options are limited as opposed to like, okay, you've got Hulu, you've got
Yeah. Well, it's
Amazon
nice.
Prime
It's nice
Video.
sometimes because I mean, I get paralyzed scrolling through stuff all the time. So like being presented with like, all right, Rush Hour's halfway over. I'll tune in. I like that movie. But
But
in
going back,
regards to like, yeah,
but I'm saying
yeah,
going back to what's going to get people to start watching it. Obviously, the fan base is already there for those who are already watching. But for somebody that's new, it's like, oh, okay. The thing I tell people is once you get past season 1 on any show, people can now find comfort. Like, okay, I can get invested. Sometimes with season 1 and lately in the last year or so, we've been seeing shows get canceled and we're heartbroken because we're like, oh, listen, but now when you get a season 2, characters can get flushed out more because even with a season 1,
yeah,
when it's an ensemble cast, you're trying to figure it out. Like, okay, who's who, what's going on. Once you get to season 2, that shows commitment from the network saying, okay, we've got promise here. Now let's
yeah,
go out and sell it. So when people come into season 3, there's a little bit of comfort, like, okay, this show's been around a long time, and because it's on Prime Video. I mean, yeah, because it's on Prime Video, they can like, okay, I don't have to go back and watch 60 episodes prior to that.
yeah. Well, I think there's a certain type of person that almost won't invest in a show until it's got a couple of seasons because, like, one, they might just like binge watching a bunch of episodes in a row, or two, because things can get canceled kind of without at a moment's notice these days. And I think in terms of what might turn people on to Upload in season 3 is one. I think it's our strongest season yet. I think it's great. I think the response is going to be great. I think people are going to really love it. And that word of mouth is always super helpful. Um, yeah, I think that's just we're counting on our fans continuing to be awesome fans and to talk about
And
the
the
show.
cast is back. People like when a cast sticks together, at least a majority of it. It's like watching the X-Men films. They were never consistent, but the cast was always the same.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
bring
And I
in
mean, we have such a fantastic cast from top to bottom. I wish, they were here talking about the show rather than me, but I'll do what I can. But yeah, and we really have dialed in on kind of what what sort of set pieces let our cast shine, because they're all good at different things. And so I think, this season is them operating at 100% strength.
like I said, like the cast is not here to talk, but as the saying goes, next man up. Be
Yeah,
ready to take the
exactly.
mantle. You got this. Represent the show. Sell it. Love it. Yada yada yada. So, but hey,
Exactly.
congrats on season 3. Obviously, I'll be looking forward to seeing your episodes. See, okay, let's see the difference, and then I'm gonna go back to this video and go, "This is what he told me." But wherever you're at, take care, stay safe. We'll talk down the road.
Thanks very much.
Mhm.
Have a good one.